Okay, thank you very much. I would like to start by saying that I feel very privileged and very delighted to have been invited for chairing this session. As you have heard, I'm an archaeologist who has been educated and trained in a very traditional manner and who later had the opportunity of a long-term employment at the University of Heidelberg. Here in Heidelberg, I have conducted research and teaching within the German humanities field, which places a very strong emphasis also on the traditional core of archaeology and related disciplines. So, after having worked in this environment for quite a long period, I have been witness to a transformative process, especially over the past decade, a process that has significantly impacted the humanities and particularly the study of antiquity. And now I would like to share my screen and show you also some um, slides. This transformation involves a major shift from focusing exclusively on antiquity to considering cultural heritage as the real object of our scientific inquiry. Antiquity is a very static concept limited to a single time level, whereas cultural heritage is much more dynamic and complex, encompassing the past, present, and future as an inseparable whole. So, from my perspective, my participation in the Spotlight Cultural Property Protection lectures is considered to be part of this ongoing transformative process. I will not speak as a proper specialist with extensive experience on this topic, but rather as a representative of an institution that recognizes the necessity of an open dialogue across disciplines and other institutions for addressing what appears to be a key issue in our modern society. With my background, tonight's topic inevitably raises two key questions that I will address in the following minutes. They refer to challenge and potential. I will start with a challenge, and namely with the question, why is education and training related to the Hague Convention a real challenge for the traditional curricula of European and North American universities? And then I will move to the potential, namely to what extent can academic institutions play a significant role in enhancing, spreading, and further developing the principles of the Hague Convention. Even though some optimists in the early 1990s spoke about the so-called end of history, implying the beginning of a new peaceful and uneventful period in global history, we now understand how utopian and naive that vision was. We live in an era of dramatic global conflicts that impact humans, nature, and of course, cultural heritage. Although the cultural heritage although the Hague Convention is now 70 years old, the challenge of protecting and respecting cultural heritage during conflicts through education and awareness raising remains a relatively new challenge, at least from the perspective of traditional universities. But why is this? Academic institutions study programs and priorities typically follow the conceptual boundaries of different disciplines. This approach is both unavoidable and sensible if we aim to achieve a high level of scientific professionalism and development. However, these disciplinary boundaries, while fostering scientific advances, also pose obstacles when dealing with complex issues that cannot be confined to a single discipline. And this is precisely the case with the protection of cultural heritage during conflicts or emergency situations. Are academic institutions prepared and capable of implementing the positions of the Hague Convention in a way that enables us to educate and train those who will undertake this serious task now and in the future? I'm afraid that the answer is no, they are not yet fully capable. For being able to achieve this, two approaches are essential, both requiring bold decision making and a willingness to take an active role in addressing the challenges facing modern society. These are interdisciplinarity and applied science. I think that it's not necessary to explain you what interdisciplinarity is. I would like only to make a comment about what I regard to be true interdisciplinarity. Not only the cooperation with other disciplines, but the willingness and the deliberation to overcome the boundaries of one's own discipline, which can lead to a transformation of his own discipline through interaction, open dialogue, and collaborative endeavors. On the other side, embracing applied science is a particularly bold step for the humanities, namely disciplines that have traditionally focused very narrowly on research without considering the practical applications of their findings. Currently, there is a divide between those who believe applied humanities are an essential and inevitable development and to those who fear that this focus might undermine the traditional core of humanities. Every academic institution aiming to play a significant role in education and training for protecting cultural heritage must take a very clear position on this issue. Therefore, academic institutions can play a more active role in education and training, but only if they're willing to introduce new study programs and modules, to modify existing structures, or to create new ones for meeting current challenges. The University of Heidelberg is one of the academic institutions that exemplifies this proactive approach, recognizing the significance of cultural heritage as a major societal issue and as an interdisciplinary umbrella for forming new scientific synergies, agendas, and study programs. The university established a central research and teaching institution, the Heidelberg Center for Cultural Heritage, in 2013. This institution is committed to sustainable networking and to the long-term development of existing competencies in the field of tangible, intangible, and digital cultural heritage. The center's key tasks include analyzing, documenting, cataloging, maintaining, exhibiting, and placing cultural heritage in a modern dynamic context in collaboration with numerous non-university partners. So, for Heidelberg and other academic institutions which have recognized the necessity to engage with cultural heritage in research and teaching, the implementation of these ideas includes a very wide spectrum of different formats. Here, I would like to present and highlight only some of them. First and foremost, of course, to develop intramural educational programs. What I mean with intramural are programs or modules within a traditional university. So this would include study programs and an entire study programs. I will show you an example or individual modules. Then student projects, which can be supported by the academic institution. So I mean to encourage students to engage in projects that focus on local cultural heritage and its protection. And then the academic institution, the university, will monitor them and support them through financial means and infrastructure, and specialized courses for professionals involved in cultural heritage, such as archaeologists, museum curators, and archivists, among several other professions, focusing on the protection of cultural property. At the Heidelberg Center for Cultural Heritage, we have established a new master program in cultural heritage and the protection of cultural property, unfortunately in German, and a PhD in heritage studies, which can be in English as an individual doctorate. The master program covers the field of cultural heritage and cultural property protection in its entire breadth, whereby the University of Heidelberg can draw on a wide range of courses from numerous disciplines that deal with diverse forms of tangible or intangible cultural heritage. So it teaches very basic skills in dealing with different forms of heritage, and it includes representatives of numerous important cultural and scientific institutions. I don't want to expand on this. I just want to highlight what teaching here includes. We have a lot of teaching inputs from the field of law, as well as events with cooperating investigative authorities, the Federal Criminal Police Office, the State Criminal Police Offices and Customs, which impact basic legal and criminological knowledge on the protection of cultural heritage. A natural science component covers the areas of material analysis and digital heritage. Internships at the cooperation partners provide practical skills as well as insights into the requirements of the job markets. The interdisciplinary, theoretically conceptually informed, and practice-oriented program helps students to develop key competencies in the field of tangible and intangible cultural heritage and the protection of cultural property. And some of the core teaching areas include the theory of cultural heritage, international and transcultural aspect of cultural heritage scientific methods for the study and protection of cultural heritage, legal and criminological principles of provenance research, digital heritage, object handling, and collection management, among many other objects. So, a second format would be, from the perspective of a traditional university, to participate in the development of extramural, I mean outside our campus, of extramural training programs, especially for military and law enforcement. A third format, or the third possibility of activities and actions would be to co-organize public awareness campaigns. And this would include media campaigns, mainly to use media for raising public awareness about the importance of protecting cultural property, to conduct actively community engagement, namely to engage local communities in the protection of their own cultural heritage through workshops, seminars, and participatory activities that highlight the importance of cultural property and how the local groups can help protecting it. And finally, a series of cultural events for celebrating and educating about the national or local cultural heritage. The Hague Convention explicitly mentioned that one of the main obligations of all involved parties is not only to protect cultural property during a conflict, a crisis, or an emergency situation, but also to take preventive measures for safeguarding it. And I think that the best preventive measure is to increase awareness and to disseminate knowledge about the value of cultural property as a common good. A further field of action would be to participate in international collaboration, and I mean both cross-border initiatives, namely participating in joint training programs and collaborating in the restoration of damaged cultural sites. And what we're actually doing right now is a sort of a cross-border initiative, and of course, UNESCO involvement, namely collaborating with UNESCO and other international organizations to align national or local efforts with global standards. And finally, what is very important from the perspective of an academic institution to foster academic research and research-based teaching. I believe that this is one of the most significant challenges for traditional academic institutions, because this requires a shift from the traditional research focus on antiquity or other historical period to new subjects that encompass the more dynamic concept of cultural heritage. So, emphasizing the present dimension should be recognized not only as a valid research topic, but also as a crucial agenda in archaeology, history, and related disciplines. Now, to summarize, by taking these steps, academic institutions can effectively implement the Hague Convention on the protection of cultural property in the event of armed conflict through education and training, ensuring that cultural heritage is safeguarded for future generations, even in times of dramatic conflicts. Recently established institutions like the Krems University, along with traditional institutions with extensive scopes and activity, like I give you one example, the German Archaeological Institute, are very well positioned to lead in implementing the Hague Convention's educational and training goals. While, and now I come to the third player, traditional universities may not yet have the same potential, but, and I would insist, their involvement is crucial for several reasons. So, the strength, or better say the strengths of traditional universities lie in theoretical exploration, which is vital as practical application. Universities possess a decisive competence, that of a historically and globally or even transculturally informed perspective, which is essential for addressing some key questions. For example, what do we define as cultural heritage? How should we handle dark heritage? Why is it important to enable local agents to play a significant role? So, why are participatory concepts so significant? These issues, central to current debates within and beyond academia, should be integrated into study curricula and public awareness campaigns as soon as possible. Cultural property and its protection can be an extremely ambivalent and complicated issue. An academic perspective, drawing on a rich reservoir of knowledge from numerous historical periods and cultural regions, can help us to educate and train all involved parties in finding tailored solutions to future challenges in times of crisis. Palmyra is a telling example for the complexity of such issues. After the terrible event of the destruction of several monuments of this iconic site by ISIS fighters, the restoration of the monuments is a pressing international priority right now. Yet, the big question is, which Palmyra do we want to bring again into life? The ancient Palmyra, the medieval Palmyra, or the Palmyra which was restored by the French excavators in the early 20th century? It suffices here to mention that even the scientific archaeological work on this site included several distractions, among which also the removal of a small Arab village located among the ancient ruins of Palmyra. So I hope that you understand how complicated these issues are and how important a theoretically, historically, and globally perspective may be. So, universities' involvement in this collective effort to protect threatened cultural heritage has also the potential to transform academic disciplines by expanding their traditional um, uh, uh, point of focus, methods, and objectives. The challenges we face cannot be addressed through the compartmentalization of specialization and tasks, but only through synergies between institutions and stakeholders willing to step out of their comfort zones and take on new roles in dynamically changing social environments. So that was my presentation. I would like to thank you very much for your attention. And I would like now to move to the second presentation by Anna Kaiser, professor at the Center for Cultural Property Protection, who will give us or who will talk about the different education formats. Dear Ms. Kaiser, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction and also for developing this theoretical base on which to continue with my presentation. I will follow a more practical approach, or try to follow a more practical approach when it comes to education and training in cultural heritage protection. And I'd like to start with why I think it's very important to have this education and training possibilities at universities or other institutions. When we think about the disaster management cycle, we have the incident happening on the very top on this slide in blue. And for me, the most important phases in this disaster management cycle are preparedness in order to be able to respond to whatever damaged or threatened the cultural heritage in question. And for that, we need interfaces. What do I mean by interfaces? We have on the one hand side cultural heritage professionals who know everything about the cultural heritage they are in charge of, they are taking care of. And when we come to a catastrophic scenario, a disastrous event, we usually have emergency responders. Thinking about firefighters, thinking about Red Cross, thinking about other emergency units, civil protection. In some countries, the military might be called in for assistance operation within the country during disastrous and calamitous events. And those two sides need to work together when it comes to cultural heritage protection. I think we all agree that saving people's lives come first, but saving people's heritage is on the next level. So that's something that needs to come immediately after saving people's lives, because it's the identity of the people, it's the identity of a village, for example, that was destroyed. It's the identity of a nation, of a country. So we are really talking very important things here with heritage protection. And in order to enable this protection in the best possible way and to enable a response in the best possible way, the interfaces are needed. Interfaces between the heritage side and the emergency response side. In order to be able to cooperate, to support each other when it comes to the protection, to the salvage, to the recovery of cultural heritage, be it movable or immovable. And for that, we need a sound preparation, a preparation of future cooperation, a preparation for a cooperation which we all hope is never necessary. But if we look around on the global in the global field, we see that cultural heritage protection is a very important topic in the 21st century, not only protecting cultural heritage from what might be calamitous events caused by climate change or so-called natural disasters, but also by armed conflict, for example. And when we imagine a disaster striking any cultural heritage, there are a number of people and institutions that can respond to that. There is the personnel of the heritage institution in question, of course, those people that curate the heritage, that work with the heritage on a daily basis, that know the heritage very best. Then we have cultural heritage professionals on a more general level that might come in and respond and assist. There are in Austria and Germany the so-called Notfallverbünde, emergency networks of heritage professionals that were especially formed to cooperate during emergencies and to assist each other. And then who might also respond is the fire brigades, the civil protection, might be the military, or might be actually volunteers. And we've done a few research projects funded by the European Union in the past, where we had a look at different European countries and on the responsibilities different institutions have in cultural heritage protection, and also on the possibilities regarding response to cultural heritage being endangered by any catastrophe. And what we see there is that volunteers are not a possibility in all European countries if we stay in Europe. So who can respond and who is allowed to respond to a cultural heritage catastrophe, that definitely does depend on the country in question. So we have to keep that in mind when we are talking about education and training, that there is a difference from country to country when it comes to legal possibilities. So we have different entities, definitely on the slide at the moment, and we definitely do need interfaces to enable these different entities to work together in an emergency for cultural heritage. The emergency responders usually have a very structured and well-established way of work, of conducting their work during an emergency, and they are not likely to change these long-standing and well-developed and tested procedures when it comes to decision making, for example. So I firmly believe that it is the cultural heritage side that has to learn to understand the emergency side, emergency response side, and that has to be educated and trained in order to face one of the biggest challenges in collaboration, is communicate the right information at the right time to the right person in the right way. That might sound very trivial at first, but we've done this in several live exercises where we've brought together cultural heritage people and emergency responders, and we've seen that this is definitely a challenge and definitely not a trivial one. And based on these exercises we've conducted since 2017, and based on our study programs, which are up and running since 2016, we have a number of lessons learned that we are currently incorporating into our revised study programs. So what we definitely learned is that building interfaces is a challenge. Building interfaces between these two entities, cultural heritage side and emergency response side. That communicating in the right way is crucial and can be very difficult. It's never a good idea to waste the time of an emergency responder during an emergency, during his or her work during an emergency, or even in an exercise which simulates an emergency, because that's as close as you can get to a real emergency without having one. And the cultural heritage side might only have one chance to make the case for the cultural heritage. Why is it important to save a particular piece? And it's also important to get to know the key players before an emergency strikes. If you have done a joint exercise, for example, if you have done a joint education or training program, you know who you're talking to, you have met each other without any pressure. You talked about the things that are important to the heritage side, to the emergency response side. In short, it's always best to know who you're working with and to get to know those people before you need them. As I said, this is based on several programs that we've run. We always try to bring together emergency responders and heritage professionals. Here you see 3 heritage professionals on an Austrian Army training site, where they were tasked with cooperating with the military and actually supervising the recovery of some very important cultural heritage. And this, for me, is all part of the preparedness phase in the disaster management cycle in order to be able to respond correctly. And when we are doing exercises, we simulate an incident, and by that we find out what's maybe not working the way it should in our preparedness measures, and then we can adjust that and readjust that. So this is not a circle that's turning around ever and ever again, starting from the very beginning, but it kind of spirals up, and the preparation for an incident and thereby the response possibilities, they become better and better with each exercise that we do. But coming back to education and training and universities and learning and teaching, we have the pyramid of learning. I guess everyone is aware of the idea behind that when you hear something, you remember 5% of what you heard. When you read something, it's 10%. Audiovisual, it's 20%. Demonstrations is 30%. If you participate in a discussion group, actively participate, you're up to 50%. If you practice something by doing it, you're actually up to 75% of remembering what you have learned. And the highest level here would be the base of the pyramid, where you remember 90% is when you're teaching others. And those two, the 75% of practicing something by doing it and teaching others, remembering 90% of what you're learning, this is what we are aiming at in the new training program that we have been or are developing. So we have this expertise and experiences coming out of 6-7 years of education and training in cultural heritage protection at our university. We already heard that it's a very young university compared to European standards, but that gives us the possibility to go innovative ways, and we are not bound by, let's say, more traditional approaches to teaching and learning, but from the very beginning we could go out in the field and develop new approaches. And we are currently revising this training program. And this is also why I'd like to take the opportunity this evening to present this new training outline to you. And I hope for some comments, some replies, some discussions on your ideas, if this is going the right way. In the background, we also have an ongoing survey running where we are actually asking questions about collaboration, cultural heritage side, and emergency response side, and how to best build these interfaces. The interfaces I mentioned at the very beginning, which are so important. So we aim at having two pillars of this new training program. One is called Cultural Property Protection and Disaster Response, and the other one is Emergency Planning and Cultural Property Protection. The basic outcome of the two short programs, certificate programs, is that on the one hand side, the students are enabled to counsel international crisis staff or military staff or civil response, civil protection staff on cultural heritage protection matters. That's the aim of the first program. The aim of the second program is that the students are able to prepare an emergency preparedness plan for a gallery, a library, an archive, or a museum, and to actually test this emergency plan together with local responders from both the cultural heritage and the emergency response side. On top of that, we put a live exercise, a big, preferably international cultural property protection exercise, where everyone who's participating can bring in his or her special focus on protecting cultural heritage. And running parallel to that, there's the possibility to expand in different fields, add additional knowledge, credentials, one of them being on cultural heritage protection and climate change. And then there's an interdisciplinary project work that we offer, in which we usually give the students the possibility to collaborate in one of our research projects on cultural heritage protection to get definitely the research focus, the interdisciplinary research focus into our training programs and study programs as well. And as I said, this is what we've built on our lessons learned and identified over the last 6, 7, 8 years. I'll give you some pictures here to get you some visual impressions as well, not only hear me talking, but audiovisual as well. So you might remember a bit more. Here, staff work presenting to the commanding officer how to best recover cultural heritage that was damaged. You have a damage assessment, collaboration again between the cultural heritage side and the emergency response side in order to recover damaged cultural heritage. And you've seen several exercise pictures now. What we've also done in a project called Protect to Save, funded by the European Union a few years ago, was to develop cultural heritage rescue teams as prototypes that we sent into these exercises. So we built prototypes for our exercises of cultural heritage rescue teams. We call them that. That are teams which consist of cultural heritage experts who know how to collaborate with emergency responders, and ideally also some people from emergency response would be into these teams, would be part of these teams. But the main idea is that these teams or the members of the teams are able to connect the emergency responders and the cultural heritage specialists, that they know the needs of both sides and that they know how both sides work, and that they actually do this and get this knowledge through joint training and exercise. We've developed a very basic structure for these teams that we send into our exercises, which obviously has a lead, has a deputy, and then has experts on different topics needed within the specific exercise, from logistics to communications, art historians, archaeologists, depending on the scenario, and very important, a reach back capacity where the deployed in the exercise deployed team can call back to and get more information or support if needed. The different capabilities and capacities that these teams had in our exercises, from security management, coordination, documentation, logistics. They're able to decide, to plan, and to lead, and to teach and to train. And of course, the situation assessment, cultural heritage assessment, decision making, and building action plans that is important for these teams. You see some of them here. On this picture, it's from a 2018 exercise, from a big international one that we staged, where you have the specialist for cultural property here. In the photo, they also built up the cultural heritage rescue team, and then did teach, in this case, the army that supported us for this exercise on how to best recover cultural heritage. You see this collaboration here, and here in a refuge that we built for an exercise. This is very basic stuff, really basic stuff that we especially developed for our training exercises, because we didn't want to blow it too high and overwhelm our participants with too much details. If you, however, are interested in how this could look in a very expanded and detailed version, then you definitely should check out these key elements of a European methodology to address the protection of cultural heritage during emergencies, which was developed by a brilliant project called ProCultHer, so protection of cultural heritage. That's where you have a much more detailed version of that. And I'd like to already sum up my ideas. We've learned and seen over the last few years that our students, coming from mostly from the cultural heritage side, but also some from emergency response institutions, that they want to have as much practical input and as much practical phases as possible. So not only traditional teaching at universities, but to do as much themselves as possible. You remember the pyramid with the 75 and 90%, that's actually where our students want to go. And that we need education and training for interfaces on the interfaces in order to ideally have a smooth transition and cooperation between the heritage side and the emergency response side. And I would also like to mention that it always has been a huge benefit for us at the university in Krems to have dedicated partners in training. Dedicated partners from the emergency response side and also museums, archives, libraries, monasteries who allow us to train at their sites and who actually support the development of cultural heritage protection mechanisms and ideas. And I'm very much looking forward to see how this was developed in Liechtenstein, which we're going to see in a few seconds. But I would also like to ask you if you have any suggestions for improvement or comments regarding our restructuring of the training and education programs at our university. I very much look forward to them either in the discussion or you can also get in contact. That's why I put our get in contact QR code on the slide right now and let us know later on because we constantly aim to improve our education and training programs for cultural heritage protection, of course, and we value any input. As we said, we base it on an ongoing summary, ongoing survey, and we love to include all your expertise into that. With that, I hand back to the chair, and I'm very much looking forward to Liechtenstein.
Well, Diana, thank you very much for this very lucid presentation. It was a very impressive array of activities of your center, which provide a very good equilibrium between education and training. Now we'll move to the third presentation with a very strong focus on training. And I would like to invite Mr. Hannes Schramm from the Office of Cultural Affairs of Liechtenstein to explain us what they have been doing there. So, dear Hannes, the floor is yours now.
Thank you very much. Good evening to all participants, also from my side. I'm Hannes Schramm, and I work for the cultural property as a cultural property protection specialist for the administration of the Principality of Liechtenstein, and as already mentioned there, in the Office for Cultural Affairs. The next 20 minutes, I will give you an insight on how we developed and still develop a respective cultural property protection system, a CPP system, to institutionalize also education and training. So it's more on how we build up the system. The main parts I will go through in this introduction. First of all, our initial situation, which is somehow special. Then our ideas about the development of cultural property protection structures and the respective structure itself. And in the end, some ideas about training and exercises, how we are going to conduct it. Some of the graphics in the slides are in German language because I took them directly out of our original guidelines and training material. So to describe the Principality of Liechtenstein, it's interesting to name some facts about this small state. Liechtenstein has a political system which is called the constitutional monarchy on a democratic parliamentary foundation. Its size, it's about 162 square kilometers, not very much, and it has about 40,000 inhabitants, which are living in 11 communities. All in all, what is very important to say is that there is a high density of cultural property considering the size of the country. So we have about 170 immovable objects on this field, in this area, not counted in the movable ones. One advantage that this country has is that there are only two administrative levels, the national one and the local one. What enables a very flat administrative structure. From a meta perspective, that is great because regarding the invention of a system, it shows directly the necessities and struggles on the different levels very quickly. Liechtenstein, as already mentioned, has quite a number of cultural assets of all kinds. There is immovable cultural property, sacred and profane buildings of various designs, as well as movable cultural property in form of different collections, national and regional ones, private ones, covering all different areas of cultural heritage. Many of them are not protected by law, but are still of significance for the society. And at latest, since 1960, when Liechtenstein ratified the Hague Convention of 1954, there has been a confession to protect cultural property. But regarding the emergency response structures in Liechtenstein, it quickly becomes obvious that there is a lack of capacities to cover that commitment. So civil protection spots exist scatterly. There are not many, it's about 4 or 5. What we started the last years was a common protection program for basic functions like ensuring emergency meeting points, ensuring evacuation, catering, accommodation. We have in every community fire brigades, and they have a very broad service portfolio, but it's very stretched. So to implement another one, it's quite difficult and more or less impossible. But nevertheless, it's our most important partner. But what we have is many cultural institutions with personnel, with specialists and material resources. So when inventing a system, or when we think about a new system, we now know that we have to invent a separate structure, that one is necessary, that we have to exploit existing capacities, and there we look very closely on the on the cultural institutions with its resources and capacities. And what we do is rely on the support of an already existing and proven system. So therefore, we have a private partner called Krems, which is in Switzerland, which had already implemented a emergency planning system in Switzerland, which we also stick to and take into account. In 2016, the different national law bodies regarding the administration and the protection of different sorts of cultural property were summed up in the law on the protection, preservation, and maintenance of cultural property. It sets the framework conditions for all activities regarding monuments protection, archaeology, collections, and the respective protection status. In this law text, it's clearly mentioned how cultural property protection should look like in Liechtenstein. But to execute the idea, it needed further guidance. And so the Cultural Property Protection Ordinance of 2021 was established, and this is therefore the basis which enables the implementation of a functioning CPP system. The ordinance deals with different active and reactive measures, which I have to show here. So it's the fixing of blue shields on cultural property. It's planning of emergency procedures. It's training of qualified CPP specialists. It's founding a CPP network in Liechtenstein. There are regulations for backup documentation to have at least a necrologue after destruction of a cultural object, and it deals with refuges. Why is that very important? Because there is also an article which has to be pointed out here. It's very necessary to pinpoint on one basic principle, and this one is stated in both law bodies, the one from 2016 and 2021. It's the owner's responsibility, which is also a very important base fact to build up a cultural property protection system. The owner's responsibility is, in this case, to have at hand sufficient protective measures for cultural property regarding incidents. Also, it includes the obligation for preparation for such incidents, and that all has to happen on own costs. For one person or one institution, that is a very big and overwhelming responsibility, which is difficult to bear sometimes. So a functioning system has to bring somehow a relief on that. Having that in mind, we have a look on the crisis management cycle here in a modified linear graphic, where we can see 4 different phases here. The phase prevention with a normal condition, the event itself, the intervention, and the recuperation or the recovery phase. In the crisis, actually, there is a lack of time, of personnel, of material, and of knowledge. To solve it, the focus should be on prevention itself, here, with risk management, event managing, and intervention. Also with the 3 sub-phases: protection, safety, and security, and stabilization. Recovery and recuperation is important, but as there is time to organize all necessary measures as well as funding, we neglect that one for the first. To make it a bit more clear, I tried to visualize these phases. Deducted from that, we could find out what a system and a guidance or a guideline have to include. First of all, we have a cultural institution, whether it's the building itself that is important or what it contains, both has to be considered. Having a look on that object, we can determine the following questions and conclusions. Which objects have to be protected? Movable inside here or the immovable ones, or both? What are the threats? Where are they occurring? What is the importance of such objects? What's the meaning of such objects? What's the worth and the value of them? And how is the prioritization conducted in these cases? So we need standards, we need guidance, and we need the supports to enable a prioritization. When it comes to an event, in an ideal world, procedures start to run. Evacuation of personnel, for example, here, who gather at an evacuation point, the immediate response by emergency first responders, the preparation for support of those organizations, and somehow the activation of a system for handling affected cultural property, if possible, following a plan. But all of that is not given. So we can, again, determine questions regarding the reaction to an event. Which institutions are involved? What are the different responsibilities of the state level, of the municipality and community level, and of the institutions? What are the procedures in emergency situations and how have they to be conducted? Which brings us to the conclusion that we need structures, we need assignment of personnel and institutions, and we need organizational and operational structure. In our perfect world again, everyone knows what to do. Emergency first response organizations, as our fire brigades, build up a security area. They know what measures have to be taken inside the object. Cultural property protection personnel supports the emergency first responders and the fire, in this case, the fire brigade, etc. Again, that is not given. That is why we have to answer the following questions. What has to be paid attention to when handling objects? Which protection measures are appropriate? So in situ or evacuation. How to deal with the objects and what is the further process? So it needs directions, it needs the preparation of building plans, material plans, and the assignment of cultural property responsibility to personnel and organizations. So this looks very complicated. I'm not going through the whole slide here, but having these questions in mind, we have to watch the different administration levels and to determine who is involved and what has to be done on which level, whether it is the strategic one, it's the operational one, or the tactical one. It also gets very clear that it needs preparation by the cultural institution itself, like emergency planning, the preparation of depot areas and material at the allocation and the allocation of personnel with CPP or cultural property protection responsibility. But also the preparation of reaction elements and material depots to support from higher levels. That's what happens here. I have it laid a little bit clearer. As well as the definition of the interfaces between those structures here and here. The institution and the emergency first responders have to be considered. That is why we filled all these conclusions about our plan structure in the guideline, which has 3 parts and is available online on our national administration website. Oh, sorry, I have to go back again. The first part contains everything about cultural property protection in the Principality of Liechtenstein, meaning how the system works. The part 2 is about prioritization. It gives us a method of prioritization and a method of risk management for cultural property. And the third part shows how to conduct emergency planning and how to implement emergency structure for cultural property. This is how they look like. As I already mentioned, you can find them on our website of the National Administration under the Office of Cultural Affairs. The first part deals with how the structure is built up and who has which responsibility. The cultural institution itself, for example, has to allocate personnel, conduct emergency planning, and prepare material and depot areas. To support the institutions and this allocated personnel, a cultural property protection network has been founded. It includes the public law cultural property owners, private cultural property owners, the Office for Cultural Affairs with Monuments, Preservation, Archaeology, and National Archives, the responsibles of the municipalities and communities, and a fifth pillar on the system is the cooperation with the emergency first response organizations like fire brigades. The main principle in this all here is that one stands for all and all stand for one, which enables a big capacity of help for an event affected institution. To be able to react to an event in a quick and uncomplicated way, the network owns a cultural property protection reaction element consisting of a command element, a rapid reaction element, a logistic element, and reinforcement. And this is how it should work. The command element gets in contact with an affected cultural institution and conducts a reconnaissance. The rapid reaction element supports the cultural property protection responsible of the cultural object regarding person power. The logistic element activates the material depot, runs administration, like the administration of personnel, organizing reinforcement, supporting with an emergency inventory system, and so on, and supports the cultural property protection work zone on the spot, logistically. The members of our element get equipped by the national administration with necessary protection gear that every member should have at hand. And this is how the equipment and the personnel look like in an event. Again, this slide, it's necessary to describe the part 2 of our guideline. And that one cares about prioritization and risk management of the object itself. What is important inside the object? Where will the threats most likely occur? Etc. Combining these two parts, it becomes clear that the event will definitely have an additional effect on the prioritization. Why we also identified an emergency-based prioritization process. If we have a look on that one, it becomes clear that we don't have priority in an event, and we are not in charge and not in question in the beginning. That is an advantage because that means, beside the not so advantageous effect on the objects, we have at least an organizational reaction time and the possibility to form an information-based reaction plan. But that all assumes a kind of preparedness, namely the conduct of emergency planning before the event. How to conduct such a planning is written in our part 3. It gives advices how to prepare the situation plan, building plans, a contact and responsibility list, a list of cultural property inside of the object, and the cultural property information sheet, as well as some administration stuff. And this is how such an cultural property information sheet looks like, containing an object description here, textual way, and also with a photo. And if possible, a planned protective measure. So That was a quick run through our cultural property structure and its development. Now we have a look on how we think about training and exercising. When we think about training and exercises, we have to find the appropriate solution for every player in the system on the different levels. So the aim is to ensure and test the functionality of the structure on all levels, to consolidate interfaces with national and regional crisis teams, to consolidate interfaces between the emergency first response organizations and cultural property protection elements, to increase cultural property capabilities of the emergency first response organizations, increase crisis awareness and capabilities of the cultural property protection element, to consolidate procedures, and to develop and consolidate protection measures. How does it look like in the training? Regarding the training, we will implement different training levels: a basic level, a level for the damage side, and the level for our specialists and the reaction element. In the last one, we try to submit and to share special knowledge skills. So this here should be restorators, this here should be conservators and cultural property protection specialists. On the other hand side, in the emergency first responders, we try to follow a top-down approach. Our aim is for sure that all personnel in cultural institutions in Liechtenstein know what cultural property protection is, so that they have some kind of basic level of knowledge about cultural property protection system. So it's more or less a down to up system. And the emergency first responders training is a top-down system approach, beginning with the officers, the squad and leadership level, which will be more local focused and focused on the cooperation with the cultural property protection advisors and personnel, and the firefighters itself, who get directly in contact with affected cultural property, and so most likely are also in contact with our specialists. To handle strategic and operational levels, we are going to try to conduct tabletop exercises. This year we start with an implementation of cultural property protection topics in crisis team scenarios. We try therefore to include cultural property representatives in coordination meetings. We try to develop a cultural property protection reaction plan. We are going to do a consolidation with the crisis response plan. And in the end, we are trying to focus on the coordination with emergency first response organizations, which are also taking part in these tabletop exercises on the crisis team level, on national and on regional level. And in the end, last but not least, live exercises with a special hands-on focus. We will start this year with the first exercise at this respective object. You can see here the advantage is that this is an object which already had an incident in 2012. So it's still in the heads of the firefighters that something can happen in cultural objects. This will get a challenge, especially in terms of respecting the priorities of emergency first response organizations, which is first to save human lives, then animal lives, then environment, and in the end, it's about values and worth and material objects. And in finding the right reaction for the active and reactive protection measures for cultural property involved in the scenario. Here again, the famous slide, the aim is to train the organization of the damage area and the interfaces between emergency first responders, meaning the fire brigade, and cultural property protection personnel, and therefore foster an awareness for the necessities of both players. So wish us good luck with that. That concludes my briefing, and I'm open for questions now.